CONCRETEFiX for 2023. We've had 74 people RSVPing. I'm sure some more will log on in a moment or so. But while we're waiting for them, I just, as usual, want to start off with a little bit of an introduction to Cement and Concrete SA. So let me just share that screen with you. And you should be seeing it any moment now. There you go. More about us. A huge thank you to our partner members, Afrisan, Lafarge, PPC, and Sapaku, that really carries the bulk of the funding for Cement and Concrete SA, but also with huge appreciation to our gold member, CRESO, silver members, and we've got a new silver member, but our silver members are Chihovi Readymix, CoreStruct, the Quick Group, Seeker, and our new one, SNA. And then also a huge thank you to all our bronze members. There are 32 bronze members, and I'm just going to run through their logos. You can see yourselves there, identify yourselves. Let me just do that. And some more bronze members. Thank you to everybody, all the bronze members. Then we're an international partner of the American Concrete Institute. And this morning, our Dr. Diraj Rama indicated that he's going to be talking to them about climate change and zero carbon. So it's good to know that we can take hands with the American counterparts. And then good news, this is not, we've not had the official certificate yet, but Cement and Concrete SA has actually been given the authority to call ourselves a voluntary association of EXA. So more about that in the very near future, when we'd be able to offer that as a perk to our members, that if you pay your membership of Cement and Concrete SA, you can get a reduction of your EXA membership. So for all the EXA registered people, this is great news. Membership benefits, you can read all about that on our website, semcon-sa.org.za, or contact Natasha Pulse. You're all familiar with her. You've all got her email address to get more information about membership benefits. There's a wealth of information available on our website. We also post on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And then a couple of things that I just want to bring to your attention. All our members would have had this notification that we currently have a vacancy for a technical manager. You would have seen it in the notice that went out. This notice is also on our website. So please look at it. If you qualify, send in your application if you wish to apply for this position of technical manager at Cement and Concrete SA. A few of our CPD events that are coming up, we've got YCRETS, that is the Young Concrete Researchers, Engineers and Technologists Symposium coming up at the University of Stellenbosch, 12 to 14 July. The registration site is on our website. It's available there. You can look at what is happening. And the good news is we have had 32 papers that's ready for presentation at this event, so it promises to be huge. And then CONCRETEFiX 2023, an initiative in conjunction with the CSIR, with Sandrel and the Roads Federation. CONCRETEFiX will be an online free-to-attend event. You can look at all the details on our website. The program is currently being finalized, so one of these days we'd be able to put the program up as well. Then, in conjunction with YCRETS 2023, there'll also be an award made to the Young Concrete Researcher Award. The details for that award, or for nominating somebody for that award, are also available on our website, and the deadline to nominate somebody is the 30th of June. And then maybe just a reminder, professional education to accelerate your career in concrete technology, available from our School of Concrete Technology. The whole education program for 2023 is available on the website. So that is just in a nutshell about Cement and Concrete SA, where we always strive to build a future for all of us together. I'm stopping my sharing now, and then I'm going to introduce you to our speaker, Richard. Just once again, a reminder, would you mind turning off your video screens so that we can save some bandwidth for this presentation? But our speaker, Richard, today, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to him. Richard, and you can start sharing your screen when you're ready. Richard Hugh is British, and he's from the UK, where he served in the British Army as a paratrooper for just short of 10 years before moving to South Africa at the end of 2009. And if you look at his LinkedIn profile, you'll see a bit more about his paratrooping experiences. But I'm glad to say that a South African wife made sure that Richard came to South Africa, and he's been in the concrete flooring industry since 2010. Apologies, this is my cell phone. Apologies, I've turned it off. He's been with the concrete flooring industry since 2010, when PMSA took over the distribution of HTC flooring systems under the Superb flooring system. And he's been involved with the sales of floor grinding and polishing machinery, diamond tools, and the training of floor preparation and polished concrete in South Africa and various countries in sub-Saharan Africa. In 2021, Superb Flooring took over the Husqvarna flooring division. And at the start of 2022, Richard became the sales manager for Superb Flooring Systems. And this year, Superb Flooring has become the sole distributor for the extended range of Husqvarna construction machinery under a new entity, Superb Construction Systems. So Richard has been in the flooring industry for 13 years now, superbly qualified to talk to us about the topic today. Richard, you can share your screen, and if I may just ask everybody else to turn off your videos and mute yourself. I'm going to turn my video for the duration of the presentation. Richard, the floor is yours. We look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, Hanley. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, firstly, thank you very much, Hanley, for the invitation, for actually inviting me to come and do a short presentation on polished concrete for the cement, concrete and cement essay. Hello to everybody else who is here. Just before I start, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Richard Hugh from Superb Flooring Systems. On that invitation, it said sales manager for Superb Flooring and PMSA. We're part of PMSA, so I just want to clear up that I'm not the sales manager for PMSA, just in case there are any people inquiring there. So I deal with the Husqvarna concrete flooring machinery, and yes, of course, I like to put myself out there and give some advice on polished concrete where and when I can. Okay, so first of all, I just want to start off with a slide. So we deal with the polished concrete industry, and of course, we like to advise where we can. So first of all, going into it, polished concrete, there's a photo of a polished concrete there, but what actually is a polished concrete? Now, there are lots of myths, there are lots of different variants of people's mindsets of what polished concrete is. So first of all, is polished concrete a power floated floor with a topical sealer? Okay, it's a concrete which is shiny. Is it a ground concrete with a surface wax? Generally, no. This is more of a temporary method of polishing a floor. Is it a screed with an epoxy coating? No, because screed isn't a concrete. A screed is a leveling system which goes over a floor. What polished concrete actually is the actual concrete itself, ideally the foundation floor of a building, or a new, ideally ready-mix concrete going into a floor. What we want to achieve is a good cast. If we're casting concrete for grinding and polishing, we want to stay away from the previous methods of walking in the mix and wood floating, etc. So we need to up our game when we're looking at casting a floor with polished concrete in mind. Generally speaking, what we want to do is make use of poker vibrators, screed beams, screed vibrators, and other items like power floaters, power trowels, just to get the floor compressed on the top to remove any air pockets and give a nice smooth finish. When casting the concrete for polishing, the smoother the finish, the flatter the floor, the less issues we are going to have going forward when we actually bring in the grinding machines to do the heavy duty grinding and polishing work. So of course, when you're looking at casting for polishing, it's always best to use a reputable concrete casting company who have many years of experience with concrete casting, and of course, preferably that they have cast concrete with polished concrete finishing in the past. Okay, so polishing concrete, what we need to think about is if we have an existing floor surface and it's not ready to grind yet, there might be something on the floor. There might be coatings, there might be screeds on the floor. So we have to look at other items, other ways of actually getting that coating off the floor, or getting the floor flat. So here, I'm not sure if you can see if I did this correctly. Here is a typical floor scraping machine. These come in many brands, of course, but basically what these things do, they're normally self-driven, and they can remove coatings such as vinyl, linoleum, carpets, even concrete screeds and concrete tiles off the top surface of the floor. These make short work of doing this. What generally happens without using these machines is very labor intensive. So what we find is there's lots of manual laborers using either jackhammers or chisels and a hammer, and they're making a big mess. They're making dust all over the place. So there are machines available that can actually take that headache away from the whole operation, making it dustless, making it easy, nice and clean to actually do the work easier. So once we're down to the concrete itself, perhaps the concrete is too soft or even too high. So also preparation, with preparation in mind, there are other ways of getting down deeper from the surface of the concrete down into the harder parts of the concrete itself. We have machines, or there are machines available across the board called floor shavers, shot blasters, scarifying machines. Now, a lot of reputable certified concrete and experienced concrete grinding companies, they would have access to these machines to actually be able to get down quicker into the stronger part of the concrete and almost guarantee a better exposure and a harder floor surface going forward. Okay, so while we're on the whole item of of floor preparation, of course, we can use the CSP standard, the concrete surface preparation standard from 1 to 10. Now, many of you in the concrete industry may actually understand what this is, but I'm sure if you're seeing my screen and you can see my mouse, CSP1 is generally a flat, floated or ground or polished surface going all the way through up to a CSP10, which might be very uneven concrete itself, or let's say jackhammered concrete, concrete that's not very flat. So how do we get from an uneven concrete all the way through to a flat polished surface? Okay, so I mentioned just now we can use machines such as scarifying machines or concrete shavers. These will be able to remove maybe up to 20 millimeters at a time of the concrete surface or even screed floor to get a nice level profile on the floor. It's going to be level after using these machines, but still it's going to take you to a profile along the lines of a CSP4, CSP5. Then we can employ a shot blaster or even a grinding machine, if it's possible, to get the machine on that floor to even up or level the surface more to make it smoother. Generally speaking, when we're talking grinding machines, they like to work best on already flat floor, but they can cope on uneven floor surfaces with a deviation of maybe up to 5 millimeters or so.
Richard, may I just interrupt you? Your screen seems to be stuck on the first slide. What can go wrong? We've not moved on to another slide.
Sorry, let me rectify that quickly. My apologies there.
Let's see if we can get that going. Richard, I would say unshare and share again and put it into presentation mode. Let's see.
Okay, let's have a look.
Now we're on a screen that got, yeah, the CPS 123, CSP 1, 2, 3, 4 to 10. Okay. Thanks,
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so so what I was talking about, this is the diagram here. Basically, CSP1 is a flatter, smoother floor. The CSP10 here on the right-hand side of the screen is an uneven floor. So what I was saying was, the bigger, the heavier machinery that a concrete contractor uses to bring down the floor surface to a more level system, the flatter the floor is going to be. So when we look here, when we're talking about concrete grinding, and I'll move away from the floor preparation, grinding itself now. So using grinding machinery, we're normally using planetary grinding machines with diamond tools, normally starting from a 25 grit, or sometimes we can start from a 10 grit diamond tool. When we say grit size on diamonds, these are on the same scale as your sandpaper. So if you're talking a 40 grit sandpaper, this is the same size as a 40 grit diamond tool. The difference being that a diamond grinding tool will start from typically a 10 grit diamond going all the way up to 3000 grit. So if you imagine that, it's going to be a very smooth sandpaper if you compare the two. Okay, so to be able to grind and polish a floor, first of all, assuming the floor preparation has been done and we have a more or less level floor, we can take a planetary grinding machine to grind off or plane off the soft paste of the concrete itself. If we're going from a floated floor, we're typically going down between 4 or 5 millimeters to find a good exposure of polished concrete stone. Let me just see if I can swap the slide here. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so I'm hoping we can see the change now. Hopefully I'm getting used to this. Okay, so when we're talking about exposure, we're talking about the level of uniformity of the stone in the floor. Now, this slide here is showing fairly good exposure because we're grinding down into the concrete through the top surface of the concrete itself, removing the soft paste. And the more passes we grind over the floor, the bigger these stones become. If you're seeing my mouse here, generally speaking, if we look here in this area, this is more of a salt and pepper finish. The deeper we grind in this area, the bigger the stones will come. They'll start looking like this. And then if we do more passes on that one, let's say 25 grit diamond tool, eventually the stones will start giving us a wider exposure. Now, this photo is a 19 millimeter stone. So it all depends on what size aggregate is in your concrete. I must just say that every single concrete that you grind or polish is exactly, well, they're all completely different from each other. You can use the same ready mix from the same company, and each one, when you grind and polish, will be completely unique. So the more you grind on the first stage, the deeper you're going, the bigger the cross section of the stones, the larger the exposure and uniformity of the concrete itself. So when we're happy with the amount of exposure on the floor, as per the quote or as per the floor owner, what they want, sometimes they will want a salt and pepper finish, sometimes they will want a high exposure. So when we're happy with that, and of course the level of the floor, then we move on to typically a 80 grit diamond tool. So when I'm saying diamond tools, basically these are metal diamond tools. They would have diamonds actually encased inside the metal itself. Now, there are many different diamond tools available on the market. It's always best to go for a reputable brand with a consistent history behind the tools themselves. Not only do we have different types of grit size in the diamonds, we also have different hardnesses of the diamond tools themselves. So if I can move to another slide quick. Okay, I'm just moving forward here. Okay, so diamond tools, this is one type of diamond tool. Typically they're wedges, and they wedge inside a grinding holder. Now, we're talking about the different hardnesses of the tools. Now, we must make sure these are correct as per the concrete we are grinding. If there are different types of hardnesses of diamond tools, there's also different types of hardness of concrete, of course. That can range anywhere from 10 MPa up to 40, 50, 60. And when you start adding some high accelerators in the concrete itself, we can get super hard concrete, which actually sometimes makes it quite difficult to grind. So whoever's grinding, polishing the concrete itself must be able to choose the correct type of diamond tools for that particular floor. A softer diamond or softer metal encased diamond tool will typically grind quicker than a harder bond tool, but it will also wear quicker than a harder bond tool as well. So a softer bond diamond tool will be more perfect for a harder bond floor. When we're grinding, something has to give. So on a softer bond tool, we're grinding a harder bond floor. The reason being the metal will slowly wear away, and it will allow more diamonds to come through and sharpen up and continue doing the grinding process on the floor. If we have a very soft floor, we can't use a soft bond diamond tool because that will do the job, but it will wear down very quickly. So typically, we move to a harder bond diamond tool to be able to counter the wear that a softer bond or softer MPa concrete will make on the tool itself. So when we're happy with the hardness of the floor and the hardness of the diamond tools that we must use, then we go from the 25 to the 80 to typically 150 grit diamond tool. Once we are happy with the exposure of the floor, going back to this one again, then we need to make sure that all of the scratches have been removed. It's pointless just doing 1 or 2 passes per stage, just to say that you've been through the different stages of diamond tools, because what's typically going to happen are we're going to leave scratches in the floor. Now, if you can see this slide, hopefully again I did it correct, we have a number of different types of scratches on the floor itself. So this is a typical 19 mil aggregate, possibly a 30 MPa floor. And we have a number of different types of scratches on the floor. So if we look at these rings here, I'm sure you can all see my mouse there, hopefully. So this is typically a 25 scratch or 25 grit scratch on the floor. This is the first stage. So by the time we finish the first stage, we have the floor. It's a chalky and a scratchy surface, but we're leaving these scratches in the floor. The next stage, we are using an 80 grit tool. If we look in this aggregate here, we can see these very fine scratches here. So the tool which leaves behind these scratches must remove these larger scratches for us to continue to the next stage. Just like sanding wood with sandpaper, exactly the same concept. The first more aggressive sandpaper does the majority of the work. And typically with diamonds on concrete, you're spending about 50% of the time on the first stage of the 25 grit diamond tool. then it's all about going through, changing the tooling to an 80 into 150 and ensuring that the previous scratches from the other diamond tools have been removed from the floor. Now, this can take a number of passes. It can take maybe 2 passes. It can take 4 passes. It can take sometimes up to 10 passes. It depends on using the right bond of diamond to be able to be soft enough to use enough diamonds to be able to remove the scratches from the floor itself. Okay, so what else can go wrong? We have uneven surfaces, but we spoke about that on the floor preparation. If the floor is very uneven, then we can use more aggressive methods to actually grind the concrete down or mill the concrete down to a flatter surface. Aggregate exposure. Generally speaking, we like to see if it's exposed aggregate finish on the on floor in respect, then we want to see lots of high exposure on the floor. Sometimes we can see areas where there are bold spots or where there's no aggregate exposure on the floor. This is generally due to the casting of the concrete. So the more care, the more time we take with casting the concrete for grinding and polishing, the better uniformity of the stone we're going to get on the final finish. Okay, so scratches, we've spoken about the scratches. So assuming you are grinding enough passes on the right tools on the floor, then those scratches should disappear by 150 grit. Cracks, okay, when we get to 150 grit diamond tools, we can now use a grouting system, which will fill up most of the small cracks, the minor cracks and the minor pinholes in the concrete itself. Now the pinholes, these are typically air pockets that's left inside the concrete during the casting process. When we're grinding off the surface of the concrete itself, we are exposing these pinholes and these minor cracks, which have been covered up during the floating. So we use a grouting process with 150 grit diamond tools. It's a wet process, so we're actually making a paste. Now, as we're pushing the machine forward, we are filling up much of the scratches and many of the cracks and pinholes with this paste. This is called the grouting stage. So we would typically go over once or twice, typically north, south, east, and west, until the concrete is dry, until the paste has been taken away. Then we would leave the concrete to cure for about another hour in this climate when it's very warm. And then we would connect the machine with the vacuum again and go over the floor and remove any of the excess grouting left on the floor. So then when we're happy with that, then we go into, typically the next day, we would use a densifier, a liquid densifier, which will penetrate the concrete. And
sorry, we're still on this screen. What can go wrong? I don't know if there should have been other slides.
Yeah, okay, I was still on that same screen.
Okay, apologies.
Has it changed now?
Yes, it's changed now. Thank you.
Okay, so I know it's working that way. Okay, so no problem. Thank you very much. Okay, so why do we densify a floor? So we densify a floor to harden the concrete itself. Let's say we have a very low MPa of sub 25 MPa concrete, which generally is not fit for polishing. By using a liquid densifier, which penetrates into the concrete, this can enhance the hardness or the MPa value of the concrete to make it harder, more durable, and actually give us a better chance of polishing the floor itself. Also, after doing the repair works with the grouting or using any fillers or anything in the concrete during that time, it will also harden all of this and prepare it for the next polishing stages. So after we finish with the liquid densification, we now go into the honing stage. Typically, again, 150 grit or 200 grit diamond tooling. These will be more than likely a ceramic or a resin bonded tool. We are running these over the floor to remove any minor scratches left from the previous stages and to get the concrete ready for for the final polishing stages. So let me just find a picture. Okay, that picture is not too bad. So what we're looking at here is by the time we get into the polishing of the concrete, we would start probably at 200, going to 400, going to an 800, possibly 1,500, and generally finishing on a 3,000 grit diamond polishing tool. Now, these at this time are generally flexible because we want the machine to be able to get the diamonds into the concrete. Sometimes there might be some lower spots. So we are ensuring that we are polishing all the lower spots and the concrete itself as we're going forward. I missed out that when we are swapping the diamond tools, we're generally starting from a low revolution or low RPM on the machine on the first stages. And every time we change a tool, going from a 25 to an 80 to 150, etc., we are slowly increasing the RPM speed of the motor, which is taking making the machine quicker and more productive because there's going to be less amps required or less friction the higher we go up with the diamond tools. So by the time we finish on a 3,000 grit tool, basically we should be looking at a floor like this, but a even exposure, a flat level surface with a mechanical shine on the concrete itself. Now, I must say that by the time we finish, the shine is mechanical. I'm just trying to find another. Here we go. So the shine is mechanical, and the shine in this photo here is actually mechanical itself. So we don't rely on any sealers or any coatings to actually get the shine chemically. The shine must be mechanically on the floor with the grinding polishing machine itself. By the time we have finished with that and the floor is clean, then generally we would use a penetrating sealer, usually lithium, but sometimes potassium as well, which we would apply on the floor using typically a microfiber mop. And then we would leave it about half an hour to an hour or so, and then use a single disc cleaning machine with a non-diamond pad just to buff the surface and get rid of any marks which are left on the floor from the sealer itself. So by the time we finish, we should have a beautiful reflective shine with a very good exposure on the concrete, depending on the floor owner's prerequisites for the floor. Okay, so again, the polished concrete, minimum 7-stage grinding polishing. We say 7-stage minimum in the industry because that's generally how many stages it takes to go from a 25 grit, which does the majority of the work, to remove the scratches in between. If we are missing any stages, any diamond stages in between, then generally what can happen is those scratches can disappear as we're going further up the system and come back to bite you when you start doing the polishing. So it's always best to follow the process, remove all of the scratches by using the correct diamond tools in the process itself. So I've mentioned grouting. Most floors will need grouting. There are some floors that have been cast very nicely that won't need grouting, but they are very seldom. Densification, I've spoken about. The stain protection is a sealer. Now, again, we rely on the sealer to protect the floor against staining. We generally don't rely on the sealer for the shine. Then when we have a polished concrete on a floor, typically a house or a warehouse or even a commercial retail store, we want to look at a cleaning maintenance method. So what we would normally employ is an automatic auto scrubber using a diamond impregnated pad instead of harsh chemicals. If we are using too high pH or too low pH chemicals as a detergent on the floor, generally speaking, that can stay on the floor. Sometimes it doesn't get rinsed off properly, and that can make the floor dirtier and start harming the floor. So we like to use a diamond pad with water for normal everyday cleaning on the floor itself. Inside the house, you're not going to have these machines, so just a microfiber mop with a very, very light soap can clean the house once a week, perhaps. And of course, when you are using a contractor, it must be a experienced, certified contractor. They must show that they've done this flooring before, they have the correct equipment, etc., and they have the correct support from their supplier. Okay, so when we are looking at the pros of a polished concrete floor, what is a polished concrete surface? What does it give you? Firstly, it gives you a diffusion open floor. This means if there are minor pores in the concrete, so if there is any moisture at the bottom of the floor, diffusion open concrete allows that moisture to actually evaporate out through the floor. If we have a coating on the floor, typically polyurethanes or epoxies, you generally need a waterproofing or a primer under the floor, under the coatings first, to make sure that this water moisture doesn't come through and start delaminating the floor. Okay, what else? We have a level surface of the concrete itself. We have a low life cycle cost. When we say about low life cycle cost, this means that it's cheaper in the long run to grind and polish a concrete compared to a lot of other alternatives out there. There is a place, of course, for epoxies and polyurethanes and tiles and wood floor. Of course, everyone has their own understanding and their own needs for a floor surface. But if we are grinding and polishing a concrete, generally it's going to last the entire lifetime of the floor if it's been installed correctly and the cleaning maintenance is on hand and is quite frequent. It's an extremely durable surface, so this is why it's great in warehousing where there's lots of forklifts going over the floor. There are pallets in warehouses which get moved. Sometimes they can scrape off the coating, sometimes they can scrape away the paint, left with the concrete exposed. So it's an extremely durable floor. It's going to last up to all the heavy duty rough and toughness that is normally happening on these high floors. High light reflection, of course. What this is doing is it's showing you have a nice clean floor. It's generally taking down or taking away the need for too many lights inside a building, because next to a window, the natural light can reflect off the floor and it brightens up the entire building itself. Okay, ESD compliant. So it's electrostatic discharge compliant, which means the floor is earth. If you are a electronics component manufacturer, generally you would need a floor which is not going to spark. And this floor passes all the standards for that to be an ESD proof compliant floor. Fireproof, yes, it is definitely fireproof because there's nothing on top of the floor itself. If you were to set fire to something on top of the floor will not burn, it would not increase the flame, it would not pass on the flame to any adjacent area. So it's 100% fireproof. The only way it won't become fireproof is if there's a synthetic topping on top of the concrete itself, which of course is liable to burn. And of course, the floor is environmentally friendly. The kilowatts used in making the grinding machine, making the floor itself, is far less than any kilowattage used in the whole making of, let's say, screeds or overlays or epoxies, and then not to mention the actual putting on mixing up these coatings on the floor itself. So generally what we have is a very hard-working, light reflective, easy to clean surface, which is very good in most of the environments which we have on commercial, industrial, or even housing as well. Okay, so one thing I didn't go into, and I'll go in there quickly, is how do we measure the surface? What happens if there's an assessment needed on the floor? Then item that we can take note of is a distinction of image or distinctness of image. We can use a machine that actually gives us a clarity measurement of the reflection of the concrete itself. Specular gloss, this is the amount of light which is reflected from the concrete. Generally speaking, you're looking around about 50 points plus on a gloss meter. Roughness average, so this also measures the smoothness or the roughness of the concrete itself. The rougher the floor, the less reflective value we're going to have from the concrete. Mole scale of minimal hardness, so this refers to the MPa of the concrete. Is the concrete 25 MPa or higher, then yes, it's polishable. If it's lower, then generally speaking, it needs a lot of densification to be able to harden that floor in preparation for polishing. And of course, coefficient of friction. The biggest question in the market is polished concrete slippery? The answer to that is no, it's not slippery as long as it's gone through the entire polished concrete process from a 25 grit up to, generally speaking, a 3000 grit. The only way it will become very slippery would be if there's a coating or a sit on top sealer on top of the floor, which actually allows aquaplaning when wet. Okay, so I think that's generally it for me. I think I've taken up enough time. I hope I haven't bored anybody with the whole grinding and polishing process. Of course, please, if anybody has any questions, please fire them through, or even use the text screen on Zoom, and I'll be able to answer them as soon as I see them. Thank you very much.
Richard, thank you. And we've already got a question there. If you look at the chat box, I'm going to read it out to everybody, and then you can reply, Richard. From Ria Suleiman, who says, the grouting process confused me a little bit. Kindly re-explain. Is the grout just a cement sand slurry mixed on site, or is it a proprietary product? Is the grout applied to the entire floor? And if so, does that not change the color of floor? I'm assuming the grout is applied to the whole floor. So how do you deal with cases where the aggregate has a certain inherent color which the client wishes to see from polishing?
Okay, Riaz, thank you very much for the question. That's a very good question. Okay, so let me just reiterate the grouting process. So we are not using a cement in the floor. We're using a specialized silicate liquid available from many grinding supply companies out there. So the grouting basically is a milky silicate. So what we're doing on the floor, when we have reached the 150 grit diamond stage, we are dampening the floor and removing the vacuum from the process, because the vacuum is normally a dry process. And we are applying some of the grouting liquid onto the floor in the areas where we have pinholes. The pinholes, remember, like I said, are air pockets in the concrete from the concrete casting stages. We would go over at a slow speed, a slow grinding speed, and a slow movement speed over the floor. So what happens is, because the floor is wet, we are creating a paste, because we are removing or grinding off a small part of the concrete itself, a small part of dust from the floor, and we are mixing that by using the grinding action of the machine with the grouting. That creates the paste. Now this paste goes back into the holes in the concrete. Generally speaking, it will stay the same color, possibly slightly lighter depending on what grouting system you're using. But what you're doing there is you're taking the dust from the concrete, making a paste, and placing that dust back into the holes of the concrete. So it should remain generally the same color. Yes, the grouting is generally apply to the entire floor. If you have holes in one area of the floor, then you're probably going to have holes in the majority of the floor. Like I said, there are some concrete floors I've come across before which actually don't need grouting. So the more effort you put into the into the casting of the concrete itself, the more bubbles or air pockets which are removed during the casting, the less grouting you would actually need from the process. Okay, so the second one, let me move into the second one here. What is the earliest time after casting that the floor can be polished? Can old concrete be polished to high standards? Okay, generally speaking, you must always get advice from a concrete engineer when looking at what time scale you should start grinding and polishing. Generally speaking, a concrete we're looking to polish would generally be around about 30 MPa. So 30 MPa, I would generally advise you can't start grinding on the first stage until around about 7 days after the initial casting process. Bearing in mind that after casting, after a week, the concrete is still very low in MPa and will be very abrasive on the diamond tools. So the diamond tool you'll be using will be a hard bond diamond tool, which will be able to stand up to the wear of the soft concrete at that point. If we're looking at a house and you're casting a slab for a house, it's very good to start doing the first stage after a week, because then you can grind the entire slab and expose the stone, hand over the floor to the builder who are building up the walls on the edges of the floor, and then come back later on after the plastering has been done and continue the process then. When polishing concrete, generally standard 28 days plus is advised when polishing after casting. Can old concretes be polished to high standards? Yes, of course they can. The older the floor, the better. They have taken many years to cure. But like I said earlier, each floor is completely unique. Some old concretes, if they haven't been especially cast for grinding and polishing in mind, beware, you might have some casting marks in the concrete, maybe some footprints, maybe some trowel marks in the floor, etc. Okay, so the next one. Do you have any technical scientific reasoning why the highly polished floor is not slippery? Yes, so there is a standard, an American standard, on the coefficient of friction. The standard is the ANSI Alpha 326 2017, dynamic coefficient friction of hard surface flooring. Now, if we use a slip tester, this will be able to give you the particular readings that the floor is slippery or not slippery as per these standards. When I said about the floor being slippery, if it's done properly, if it's done with no chemicals on top of the floor surface, then there's no reason why the floor should be too slippery as per these standards. Okay, so the next one, what is the typical cost of polishing concrete in rand per square meters? Very good question, and I can give you a general guide, but of course, I'm not the person to be quoting. We do not do the floors. We are a advisory role in the concrete flooring industry. So typically in a house you would have a lot smaller areas, square meter areas than a large building, let's say. So in a smaller house, a concrete contractor will be able to do less work with that machine than using the same machine on a large open area, due to there being a lot more edge work required in conjunction with the area of the floor. So in rand, I would say there'll be concrete grinding and polishing companies out there who probably won't do a house floor for anything less than 500 rand per square. And of course, you can get quotes from them. Please read the terms and conditions. That may include the preparation of the floor surface, that may include the sealers, etc., etc. But that's a general guide. In a larger area, let's say we're talking warehouse, 10,000 square meters plus, then of course the price can come down dramatically because the larger machinery can deal with a larger area and a larger productivity per day. So we're probably talking minimum 250 Rand per square meter. Of course, don't quote me. It all depends on the contracting companies who are quoting you. Generally, the cheaper guys who are quoting you will not have the correct experience and the correct machinery and experience involved. You have to, when getting a quote, get as many quotes as possible and read all the terms and conditions and exactly make sure people are quoting like for like on the floor. Okay, one more coming through there. How do you grind in the corners of the slab between the walls? Okay, so that's also the other frequently asked question. So yes, the grinding machines are for area work. They generally won't get close to the walls. There are edge grinding machines and handheld tooling available, which can get close to the edges, let's say about 1 millimeter or so away from the edges, into the very corners, the 90-degree corners in between walls. Then there are two ways to do this. If you're building a house or a building for the first time and you can cast a slab, like I said, you can do the initial exposure, the initial grinding stage before the walls go up, and that allows you to get very good exposure next to the wall. The other way is to use a handheld tool. You can use a basic 115 mil baby grinder, ideally a variable speed grinder to be able to cope with the friction of the floor, and that will get you as close as possible to the corner. There's a very, very tiny area of the corner itself which you won't be able to get a rotary tool into, but there are other vibration tools available on the market which can get very, very close into the corner itself. Thank you very much for all of your questions and everybody for listening. Again, I hope I haven't made anyone fall asleep with my long talk about polished concrete. If there are any other questions, please don't hesitate to get hold of me. I'm based in Johannesburg in Jet Park. I'm sure you will find my details on the invite. Thank you very, very much for everybody for tuning in. Yes, I can. Sorry, last one there. If you want to email me, then of course I can forward you my slides. Yeah, I have no problem doing that at all. Please let me know. Andy, thank you very much for the invite again. I really appreciate the opportunity for me to participate. Again, I hope I haven't been too boring going on and on about polished concrete flooring. Thank you very much for everybody.
Richard, well, thank you to you. And I think I can say without reservation that the amount of people that logged in and the people that stayed online and the questions meant that you did not bore us. We know that floors are quite a topic people enjoy listening to it, and that's a topic that often, or a part of our concrete construction that often presents problems. So I like the way that you pointed out, get a number of quotes and try and compare like for like. Don't necessarily go for the cheapest. We all know that that's not the answer in construction. But Richard, thank you for presenting to us. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Anybody that wants to get in touch with Richard, we will have his email detail. You can talk to Natasha, she could let you have it. Richard, thank you for sharing. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. And we've not finalized the topic for the next CONCRETEfix, but hope to see you online again in a month's time. Take care, everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.